All right, welcome back to the main conference room. Again, we would like to thank our presenters, Mr. Floro Astilio, Ms. Victoria Delgado, Mr. Timothy Salomon, Mr. Noel Cabangin, and Ms. Mary Lord Lopez. Hi, Attorney June. Would you like to read the feedback in our comment section before we proceed with our morning plenary? Paki-unmute po si Attorney June.
Thank you. Yes. And the good news is that we received a number of comments on
Yes.
to the speech to the keynote earlier delivered by Professor David Fairman. Let me read some of them. No? Kasi, ano, okay, from Adet, no, our president, she said, "We work in the world as it is and put across issues of equity and fairness." Yes. Nika Olet of PMPI said, "Good presentation and hopefully can expand discussion on the shift of mindsets to capacitate mediators." Thank you. Si Marisa Puche, ang pinakagusto ko ay yung slide niya on shifting mindsets. It's only when mindsets are changed that we create headways towards communication and compromise. And then Chofilo Laharca said, "Many Filipinos have unwavering commitment to positions, and this is an impediment to mature education in the practice of reasonable dialogue. Most Filipinos use the telenovela as basis for mitigating conflict. Perhaps this is the time we introduce the values of collaborative negotiation at elementary levels, possibly at grade 4 onwards." Yes, I really agree. No? Ang tinitingnan natin sa MedNet kung paano natin mai-influence yung mga schools natin para turuan ng productive, healthy na pag-uusap ang ating mga kabataan, lalo na yung non-violent communication. I think that will help end bullying and etc. Polarization and the like. No? Si BJ Angeles-Mendoza, looking forward to have more discussions on the slide about where do we go from here. Yes, in fact, I think yung presentation of David Fairman can actually lead us to our strategic plan. No? And Tutsi Herrera said, "I like his take on creativity. That is the use of various tools that would allow the stakeholders to reflect on and change their mindsets towards breakthrough collaboration. I find this useful, not just in the mediation of conflicts, but in our varied undertakings to engage people and LGU in participatory governance." Oh, that's it. So we can continue.
All right. Thank you, Attorney June. We will now proceed to this morning's plenary. Our breakout session moderators will now be reporting on their respective discussions. First, may we call on Attorney Armand Amang Mejia, who will be sharing their discussion on agrarian dispute resolution. Sir?
Good morning. Good morning, everybody. I was tasked to moderate the discussion on agrarian dispute resolution. And now I would like to report, take some time to report what transpired during that session. So we had two presenters, both MedNet members, and both very experienced DAR mediators in the person of Vicky Delgado from DAR in Negros Occidental and Floro Castillo from DAR in Mindanao in Davao del Norte. So they gave very engaging presentations. No? Vicky talked about her experience mediating a conflict between a conflict with many stakeholders, but mainly between heirs of a family, no, who wanted to recover their land, which was leased to a third person by one of the siblings. No? So, ang tawag niya sa kanyang presentation ay sentimental value, because what drove the complainants to complain, no, and to seek mediation was they wanted to get back the land kasi nga they had it was from their grandfather and they had sentimental value in the land. No, so it was a to summarize, it was a multi-pronged dispute. There was the lessee, there were the elder brother and the younger brother, and in the end, what happened was that the mediation was successful because all of the stakeholders were able to have their interests met. So the lessee, who was now in possession of the property, agreed to return the property to the family. And then in return, the lessee would be allowed to finish the term of his lease, no, for the last 3 years and to recover what he paid as lease for the property. Okay, so there are still conflicts, but in the yung issue na yun na resolved, and so that became subject of an agreement. And Floro reported on a classic tenant-landlord dispute. No? So the classic landlord-tenant dispute usually goes this way, which is the subject of Floro's presentation. There's a tenant who fails to turn over to the landlord yung kanyang share in the produce, no? Tapos so nag-complain si landlord, and the landlord eventually said enough is enough. Gusto ko nang bawiin yung lupa, ako na lang ang magkukultivate kasi hindi naman sumusunod sa usapan yung ating tenant. Okay, so that was the subject of the report, and what happened there also was after some time, the tenant agreed to both gave way to each other, met in the middle, and sabi ni landlord, sige, I will give you a 5-year extension, but until then, no, after that, I get back the land. During the 5 years, lahat ng produce sa'yo, no? Sabi ni tenant, sige, okay na ako dyan because in 5 years time, my children would all have stopped working, studying, and they will start working. So, okay na ako in terms of livelihood. Whereas sabi naman ni landlord, okay na ako because I have waited for 25 years to get back this property. What is another 5 years? So both in both instances, nagkaroon sila ng compromise. And I would like to highlight yung report nila, what helped them resolve these disputes. For both of them, they both said that what was key for them was to employ techniques that we usually employ in mediation, meaning to say primarily the use of caucuses to talk to the parties separately, the use of investigation to know the facts of the case. No, so kanina there was something about conflict mapping, sinabi ni Kat. No, so this was an exercise in mapping the conflict by way of investigation, doing further research into the background of the dispute. So it helped to arm them the start of the mediation process. So bago pa sila mag-usap, alam na nila yung how to. They had an idea of how to approach the process and how to try to resolve the dispute. Okay, so it helped that they were that they laid the ground rules for the dispute early, especially in the dispute resolution process, because especially in the case of Miss Vicky, kasi maraming mga stakeholders doon, unlike in the case of Floro na dalawa lang, the landlord and the tenant. In Miss Vicky's case, dumating yung pamilya, dumating yung tenant, yung asawa nung isang brother, yung landowner, so marami sila. So it helped them control the proceedings. Also, it helped in this case, since we're talking about agrarian dispute, it helped that they had knowledge of the law because it helped them explain to the parties ano ba yung rights and obligations ninyo, no? If we are to resort to what the law says, no? So napaliwanagan in some instances, like Floro said, paliniwalagan niya yung landowner na hindi po tama yung sinabi ninyo, that the tenant, even if he's the child of the former tenant, can still go on with cultivating the property because the law recognizes his right to such. No? So for them, it helped that these were the tools that were employed, and also that the parties were cooperative. No? So dun sa landlord-tenant, may blood relations, no? As well as dun kay sa issue ni Vicky. Okay, so there were we did not have many questions because of the limited time, no? Pero in the time that we had, certain questions were raised, no, from our colleague in Mindanao, BPOS, that tanong sila because sabi nila we also have similar cases like that, no, in our place dito sa BARM. And sabi nila what are the parameters, no, the jurisdiction of the DAR in handling cases. So Vicky explained that tenancy issues, no, landlord-tenant relationships, ito mostly yung inahandle namin, no, between the landlords and the agrarian reform beneficiaries, holders of CLOAS and emancipation patents. Carol also asked about the process, no? So we took some time to dissect the process, no? Ano ba what led them to the resolution? So what was the communication strategy employed, no? What was the atmosphere, no? Issues of gender were also discussed, no? Nakatulong ba na mas maraming babae kaysa sa lalaki, no? In the case of Vicky, mas marami daw babae, and perhaps that also helped, no, tone down the heat from the dispute, no? So by way of synthesis, I only have a limited time, no? So I think we had a fruitful discussion. We could have used a few more minutes for open forum, but I think in the time that we had, we were able to study two good cases and pinpoint, no, what helped in resolving those cases, especially those techniques employed by our mediators, Floro and Vicky, to resolve the disputes. So that's all for our group in agrarian dispute resolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Attorney Amang Mejia. May we now hear from Attorney Mendoza, who will be sharing their discussion on ancestral domain dispute resolution. Attorney BJ.
Okay. Magandang tanghali na pala. No? Okay. Ayan. Okay. So in our group, we had a very lively discussion. Okay. So I think the presentation of the sharing of Timothy Salomon actually I would consider it as a parang take-off case for future discussions, because I think what he shared happened in one area, no? Ito yung case of the Tinuyan Falls, no? It's an overlap of an ancestral domain with other land types, so particularly yung protected area landscape, which involved the Manobos, no? But of course, yung case na yun, siguro lang magandang tandaan that the experience also happened in other areas of the country. So magandang makita yung lessons from this case, which can be applied or which can be also parang lessons learned, no, for other similar cases in the country. No? So yun yung specific conflict, and So ancestral domain and protected landscape. There was a memorandum of agreement with the previous mayor, which was not respected by the succeeding mayor. So there were warrants of arrest that were issued against some IPs. There were termination of IP workers, and they were replaced by migrants. No? So ganun yung naging parang conflict dito na yung warrants of arrest because of supposedly illegal kaingin. So kumbaga yung case parang criminalization, no? Of resource rights. No? And of course, the Manobos were regarded as threat, no, to the conservation of the Philippine eagle. No? So when in fact they were the ones who were actually protecting the area. No? So may mga affidavits that actually that were issued, no, parang waiver from occupying the area and also from locating the area. So at that point, dun naman yung naging parang intervention of the group of Timothy National Land Coalition Philippines, no. And he shared their intervention at two levels, both at the community level and also at the policy level. No? So on the community level, kumbaga there were trainings. Basically, the goal of the trainings were to level, no, the playing field to enable the indigenous communities to participate in mediation efforts that are more fair. No? But kumbaga hindi sila yung nag-mediate, but they were partners, no, of the local community. So yung trainings involved parang awareness raising about their rights, about communication and handling of media, etc., effective participation in the PAMBI. They made referrals to legal groups, no, and they also helped supported yung kanilang direct negotiations with the RD of the DNR and Caraga, etc. No? Pero of course, yung observation dito parang systemic yung nangyayari in other areas. No? So yun yung community level. And then they also had policy level interventions, particularly a policy paper regarding an implementing rule and regulator, a set of rules and regulations issued by the NIPAS, and also yung Supreme Court decision, itong number 224469, no? That was cited, wherein I think if there are sinasabi dun sa decision, if there are sustainable resource rights practices that conflict with resource laws, then the government should recognize those practices for as long as those are sustainable and traditional. No? So in a sense, it affirmed yung IPRA over resource laws. Okay? So yung naging results sa report ni Timothy, yung results nito, yung cases that were filed against the IPs were dropped. No? So nawala yun, and the group was recognized as a member of the PAMBI in the formulation of the ADS DPP at saka yung i-formulate na PAMBI plan. No? Tapos may iba pa mga support. At yun nga, I think yung lessons learned that he shared referred to yung the importance of capacity development of the IPs, in direct engagement with concerned offices in government, and of course, learning from the Supreme Court decision. Ayun. So, I think ang pinaka-interesting dito yung aming discussions. So, I think we did not have enough time to finish. So, hopefully, there will be a continuation of that discussion in the plenary. Pero siguro sabihin ko lang yung mga key points. No? So, I think while Timothy mentioned about yung kanilang journey in trying to level the field, not enable the indigenous communities to participate in mediation efforts that are more fair. I think yung discussion namin napunta hindi lang about allowing them or enabling them to participate more effectively in mediation efforts, but also broadly, no, in natural resources governance. No? But our discussion also also highlighted, no, yung mga challenges, no, of engaging a seemingly uncooperative or reluctant LGU, no, in the conversation. So parang challenge on how do you now, kasi sa case na to, yung LGU hanggang ngayon hindi pa rin ganun cooperative. No? So they are moving towards engaging them. But how do you do that? What would be a good strategy, and they're now thinking about and reflecting about how do you frame the conversation with the with the LGUs, no? And also we also had an interesting discussion about yung role ng NCIP in the efforts to bring parties together. I think in this case, para hindi malinaw sa NCIP na yun pala yung role nila, o hindi nila alam na paano gawin yung role na ito. So siguro key point is how do we also increase the capacity of the NCIP in doing this, and also becoming more aware about their role, no, in these kinds of conflict scenarios, no? Tapos yun din, meron ding points about how do we ensure that the IPs themselves do not abuse or do not exploit yung given the Supreme Court decision. So ang usapan naman dito ay meron namang mga pwedeng mga mechanisms that can be developed or already there that will help, no, conserve biodiversity and ensure natural resources protection. Okay. So yan. Ang isa pang interesting na discussion sa amin, yung parang ano ba yung role ng iba't ibang mga stakeholders, no? So kasi sa yung kay Timothy, they were supporting the community, but also they're now moving towards helping them in the mediation process. So, pero baka dapat, I think this was pointed out by Ma'am Miriam, na nabanggit ko rin na ito rin yung parang discussion points when MedDep was being starting, no? Yung being aware of our roles. So some of us, ano ba yung role mo? Are you a mediator, or are we community organizers? Are we negotiation coaches? No? So there are different possible roles that stakeholders can play. Although you have the same objective of trying to level the playing field, trying to reduce the inherent inequality and power imbalances that are common in ancestral domain disputes. Yun. So paano ba yun? Ano yung pwedeng gawin? Kumbaga yung border between mediation, advocacy, organizing, negotiation, coaching, so as not to reinforce yung inequality. Yan. So yun. Tapos, in terms of capacity building, I think the presentation focused on increasing the capacity in different aspects of the IPs, no? But there were also points that were raised during the discussion na, okay, dagdagan ito ng halimbawa, including raising awareness on environmental law, so that we help also communities to be not in conflict with the law, and to also condition them to participate in more meaningful ways, no? At yun, at isa pang magandang point, I think si Raven yung nag-raise nito, no, na kumbaga, hindi lang yung IPs, pati yung mga non-IPs should also be, their capacities, there should be reflective thinking about the role ng non-IPs. No? So, kumbaga, different roles we could all play. We all have our little bubble, gusto gamitin yung phrase ni Raven, little bubbles of influence. No? We have different roles to play, but of course, at the end of the day, at the end of all these processes, we all contribute to attaining peace, to attaining, to building collaborative processes among members of communities. So yun, parang ganda-ganda, parang hindi pa kami matapos, so siguro ituloy na lang sa plenary. Maraming salamat kay Timothy at sa mga very active na participants doon sa session na.
Thank you, Attorney BJ. Lastly, we have Mr. Klaid Sabangan, who will be sharing their discussion on estate management dispute resolution. Hi, Sir Klaid.
Alright, ayan, allowed na ako to unmute. Magandang hapon po sa lahat. Karaniwan, kapag when we hear the phrase informal settler families, urban poor sector, ang inaasahan na nating conflict o issue dyan revolves around relocation, papayag ba sila o hindi. But today, we were given another angle ng mga problemang kinakaharap sa tenure nitong mga sektor na ito. Shared to us by si Kuya Noel Cabangin at saka si Atty. Mary Lord Lopez from APOAMP, yung kanilang organization, people's organization nila doon. Itong mga taong ito na miyembro ng APOAMP ay apektado ng isang government project along dun sa Manggahan Floodway sa Pasig, na kung saan sila mismo ay nandoon sa embankment section ng project ng government. So ang NHA ang nakatoka na agency to resettle them. And we know that kapag ka-resettlement na ganyan, dalawang bagay lang ang iyong pupuntahan. Magbabalik probinsya ka o ikaw ay a-assign sa isang relocation site na malayo sa kung saan ka na naninirahan. But this time, yung kanilang, through their organization, gumawa sila ng People's Plan sa tulong ng kanilang NGO partner na CO Multiversity. At ito ay naging successful. Nagkaroon sila ng mga pabahay sa pamamagitan ng pagtatayo ng mga medium-rise housing, medium-rise building. Ngayon, nung nandun na sila sa medium-rise housing relocation nila, dun umusbong ang bagong problema. Como ang buhay nila nung nakaraan, nandun sila sa informal community nila, wala namang mga problema o yung klase ng lifestyle ngayong sila ay na-resettle ay nagbago na. Nagkaroon ng shift sa kanilang lifestyle. Ano ang isang halimbawa doon? Ang parking. Imagine niyo sa isang informal community, wala namang pakialam ang bawat isa kung saan mag-park ang bawat isa. Pero ngayon, nasa isang compound sila, mayroon ng mga parking slots. Kailangan mayroong sense of order sa bagay na to. Wala sa konsepto ng maraming tao. At kasabay nun, siyempre, nasettle na sila. Kasabay nun, yung mga anak nila ay nakakapagtrabaho na at nakapag-isip na sila na magkaroon ng mga sasakyan, among other things, no? Dahil nano-normalize na, quote-unquote, yung kanilang settlement status. Ayan, nagsipagbili ng mga kotse, ng mga four wheels, ang mga sasakyan. Nagkaroon din ng peace of mind na marami, nakapagtrabaho na. Meron na diyang mga nag-grab, lalamove, nagda-tricycle driver. Naku, napakadaming sasakyan. Yung inalat ng NHA, ayon sa report ng NHA, hindi niya akalain na magkaroon ng ganitong pag-usbong, pagdami ng mga sasakyan. Mantakin nyo, iba't ibang kategorya ng mga sasakyan ang pumapasok. Yung pag-aari mismo ng mga relocatees, ng mga miyembro nila. Yung mga ipinapasada, jeep, tricycle, pedicab, ipinapasok lahat yan sa kanilang compound at pinaparada yan somewhere. Pero hindi yan na-project, hindi yan nabilang ng NHA nung dinisenyo nila itong People's Plan o itong kanilang housing project na ito. Hindi pa bilang dyan, yung mga sharer, mga nakikitira ng mga kamag-anak na may mga sasakyan din. No? Hindi, so sobrang dami at hindi na talaga nakayanan. Nagbunga ito ng conflict. Kung kaya't kinailangan ng samahan ng APOAMP na harapin ang conflict na ito para hindi ito lumala. Dahil nagsisimula ng magbangayan at magkaroon ng napakaraming mga hindi pagkakaunawaan sa komunidad. Ginamit ng APOAMP ang kanyang existing mechanism to resolve the conflict. Itong APOAMP ay mayroong floor leaders, 5 floors kasi per building. Meron siyang floor leaders, parang mga zone leaders, no, sa barangay level. At meron siyang building representative, meron silang mga committees on the higher level, meron silang board of directors, meron silang council. So yun yung levels ng conflict resolution. So dadaan muna yan sa pinakamababa, sa floor level, pagkatapos building level, tapos organizational level na. Kung hindi, aabot ito sa NHA for sa last resort na para i-desisyonan yung kanilang conflict. Mayroon ng existing na ganyan. Nagkataon, nung kinakaharap nila yung problemang ito, ay nasumpungan naman ang MedNet ay may training sa isa sa dalawa kanilang miyembro, si Kuya Noel at saka si Mary Lord, kaya't nadagdagan ang kanilang kakayahan upang i-resolve ang mga conflict na ito. Sinubukan nilang gamitin ito. Nagamit nila ito sa maraming maliliit na mga domestic problems nila, at eventually, magsagawa sila ng mga series of consultations with the stakeholders, with the leaders, with decision makers sa kanilang community, sa kanilang housing project. At sa pamamagitan ng lakas ng kanilang samahan na existing, dinagdag mo yung mediation skills na nakuha nila sa training, nakatulong upang makapaglabas sila ng mga epektibong resolutions para ma-resolve ito. Ngunit hindi na tayo sa report nila, yung sa kanilang pagsusuri o sa takdang kalagayan sa ngayon, the conflict is not yet over. No? Meron lamang na resolve ang ilang mga aspeto nito wherein para hindi lumala, pero ang isang problema, dumadagdag ang mga sasakyan. Kailangan mo talaga yung gawan ng solusyon. And take note, hindi lamang yan ang kinakaharap nilang problema. They also mentioned another problem wherein yung sewerage yung drainage, sewer system ng kanilang project ay medyo may problema. Yan ang haharapin nila sa susunod. Ngunit ang pinaka-bottleneck ngayon dito sa parking problem nila ay meron silang na-identify na isang solution na makakatulong ng malaki para dito ay yung paggamit ng isang NHA property na nandun din sa kanilang compound na yon, pero ayaw ipagamit ng government, ng NHA particular. So anong isang ibig sabihin yan? Meron kang ang organization na may nakikitang solution, ngunit ang susi na para ma-resolve yon, ang government o ang NHA in particular ay hindi cooperative sa aspeto na yon. No? Kaya ito ay mga patuloy na mga kinakaharap. Bagamat na epektibo yung prosesong na ginagamit, yung kanilang mekanismo, epektibo ang mga skill sets na kanilang ginagamit ngayon, ngunit may mga hamon pang paparating. Yung aming question and answer portion ay naging mabunga din at napakaganda ng ilang mga mungkahi ng ilang mga participants na nandun. Baka magandang dagdagan pa o palalimin ng APOAM ang kanilang patuloy na pagsusuri at pag-acquire ng mga kakayahan upang tignan ang iba pang mga aspeto tulad ng anong kinalaman ng building code ng LGU dito na pinapatupad. Baka pwedeng doon tumuon, no? Baka pwede ring tignan at makipag-partner o makipag-dialogo sa mga ahensya ng gobyerno na may kinalaman sa transportation. At iba pang mga mungkahi na lumabas na nagsasabi lamang na mainam na huwag bitawan ng APOAM ang kanilang kasanayan, kundi patuloy nila itong gamitin using their existing very good installed mechanism at para maharap nila ang mga problema pa na ito. Yun lamang po at magandang tanghali sa inyo lahat.
Thank you, Sir Klaid. Maraming salamat po sa ating mga moderators.